Jim Kambosos, mate, you've done it 4 years, 5 years in a row. Massive big fights. Another one awaits you. Your sixth world title fight in 4.5 years. Richardson Hitchins for the IBF Super Lightweight World Title. Tell us about how this deal got done. I know both the boys were calling each other out over the last sort of 6, 7, 8 months, but it's fruition. It's gone to fruition now, and we've got a fight. And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we obviously had that Sydney fight, so the thing is with Matchroom. So, obviously you got to look at why we're fighting in Sydney, why we basically, making it a budget type investment fight. What's in front of us and how's it going to work for George Kambosos? So obviously we knew that Hitchins is the IBF 140 pounder. So obviously, we ensured that, Hitchins, as long as he didn't come to an agreement, which at the time I think he was talking to TA, but we knew that he wasn't going to get the TA deal done because obviously Barbosa was his mandatory. I negotiated the deal as a clause in George's contract, literally to have Richardson Hitchins, provided George Kambosos was victorious in his Sydney fight against Jake Wiley, that George was going to fight Richardson Hitchins for the IBF World title next. And that is the case right now.
How excited are you for this fight, your team? And I mean, you've been in the biggest fights in this country in the last 5, 6 years. Obviously,
Huge.
this fight's overseas.
Yeah.
How does it feel for you as a manager? After the Lomachenko fight, there was some sort of doubts on George. I know he was such a high-level fighter, and, most fighters in Australia haven't fought at that level against a guy like Lomachenko, but you guys did the Jake Wiley fight earlier this year. You're back up and running. George is looking fit and strong at 140. You must be wrapped.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, George has been a 135 his whole life. Making the moves was always in the back of our minds, but it's hard to make the move to 140 because, you had the likes of, the Lomachenko fight that was going to happen. So, do you make the move, you go to 140, you miss out on a Lomachenko fight, which obviously went ahead against, the greatest of all time, in a sold-out arena in Perth. No, we stuck around for the 135 division, one more crack, obviously against Lomachenko, but obviously moving forward, we made the decision to move to 140. I mean, George is looking super great at 140. He looked fantastic in his last fight in Sydney. He's back in the winner's circle. Confidence is high. And sometimes you need these kind of fights where you need to take a little step back after being fighting, the best of the best of the best of the best of the best for so long. Get back that confidence, get that mojo back, and you can see George got that mojo. And literally now we've just gone straight back into another camp. It hasn't really stopped. I mean, George took a week off and he's right back in it. So he's super, super fit. He's firing in all cylinders. The biggest thing now is trying to ensure George doesn't peak too early because he's really, really looking very impressive with our American assistant trainer that's come in, Ramon Matthews, which is a great move on our behalf to bring him in and keep George sharp with that American style. Everything's going great and super excited about this fight. And, fighting back in New York, I mean, George has got great success over New York. I just believe that George, he's a road warrior. He enjoys that challenge over there. And Madison Square, he's very familiar with. So, June 14th, that's our date, and we're working towards that date. And 8 weeks this Saturday is pretty much, the date that we're working towards.
Has it surprised you that when Richardson Hitchins beat out Liam Parra that he called George out the day after the fight? He's been zoned in on George. Do you think that's obviously, a great thing that he knows and respects that George been in there with Devin Lopez, Lomachenko, Bay, Selby, these guys? He's been in with some really, really big guys. Yeah. Hitchins wants to fight a guy that's been in with those guys. Is that what Hitchins has been seeing when he's been calling out your son? You know what I mean? Because he's been very locked in on George.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody knows what George is like, mate. He's the most marketable, 140 pounder now, most marketable 135 pounder. But the thing is, even if Hitchins hadn't won that title and Liam retained the title, everybody wants to call out George and get on that big platform against George Kambosos. But
Do you feel Paro was going to do that?
yeah, 100%. I mean, it was already in the back of his head, that you beat Hitchins, you fight Kambosos in a mega Australian fight in Australia. I mean, unfortunately, it didn't play out like that. I mean, they were given the opportunity to make that happen. I think that ship sailed now, and there goes the mega Australian fight where a lot of money would be made. And I always said that was a 50-50 fight if it ever took place.
You wouldn't do it if you beat Hitchins?
Not really, because if we beat Hitchins or George beats Hitchins, he's got the belt, we need to go back to something that works for us, and that means just chasing another title holder.
Yeah, George spoke about that.
And there's some good names there. So we'd be, we win that. George wins that title belt, and that's all we're really focused on. I know George touched on it before, but we'd be chasing unification. We're not going to go back to something that doesn't stack up for us. It just doesn't work from what we're angling and where we're working at. But I don't even think that Eddie would make that happen. And you're talking about if we went back to Lee and Paro.
Well, he can't. Paro's
well, that's right. He's not there anymore. He's not part of Matchroom anymore. So that's definitely something that can never happen. The only way something like that could happen, and that's possibly both guys don't have any belts in the future, was just an all-Australian fight between two big names, and just do it as free agents. But then again, that's something that you negotiate away from any fighter having a promotional agreement with a promoter.
What do you see in Richards and Hitchins? George speaks about he's not 1/10 of Devin Haney, he's not on Lopez's level, he definitely ain't on Lomachenko's level. I know Richards and Hitchins sort of thinks that he is. George spoke a little bit yesterday around his amateur pedigree, how he represented Haiti.
Yeah.
George doesn't believe he's nowhere near these guys. What do you see in him, and what are your potential, concerns of George heading into a fight with a slick guy where George has had a little bit of trouble with movers before?
Yeah, but when you compare movers and movers, you're comparing, you're referencing to Devin Haney. I mean,
and Loma.
Yeah, but Devin Haney's got that American style, that back foot movement, and literally, he does it so well. But Richards Hitchins is not Devin Haney. He's nowhere near a Devin Haney. I know George has said that, and our trainers say that. And, mate, Richards Hitchins is just basic. Basic. He's so basic that the combination to the safe is not as complicated to crack as you think, because the guys that he's beat, and let's be honest here, Lemnos beat him, and I think Mendes gave him a hard time as well. He hasn't fought anybody at that calibre. George has fought the big names, and George comes with a bigger bag of tools than what Hitchins has faced. So that's why we see Hitchins as a very, very basic model of Devin Haney model. He's the base model. He doesn't come with the electric windows. He doesn't come with the sunroof. He doesn't come with the air conditioning. He comes as a base model, and we know we've got his number when the two boys, face each other after that bell.
Does it excite you with this fight that you see a lot of the Lopez versus Kambosos fight in similarities, not in styles, but into the build-up? Does Richardson Hitchins sort of know what he's in for? Because when you sort of go at Kambosos, it's not a good thing. Like, when Lopez went at Kambosos and they're going back and forth, George sort of mentally had him strung out before the fight and then worked him over pretty bad in the fight. Do you see that with Hitchins, he wants to talk and do all this bullshit, but really George will be mentally too strong for him before he gets into the ring, which will bring the advantage to George in the fight?
I think he's already up 10-zip on Twitter. I mean, George just keeps making him look silly and keeps destroying him every time Hitchins tries to, bite back and try to throw out a tweet or whatever it may be. But there is similarities, but privately talking to George away from cameras and away from anybody, he's actually easier pickings than TFE, mate. He's actually easier to get to, and it's starting to show because I've been seeing some of the cameras are now in front of Hitchins when he's at the events. It doesn't seem like he's sure of what he's actually saying. You know, he says one thing and then he backflips and goes to another thing, and then he calls George a bum, and then he talks about he's a warrior, and to be honest, I think he knows that the days are getting shorter, and he seems to be mumbling and fumbling, and he's kind of like confusing his statements, and he's not clear in response to what he really wants to project and tell George. So he's an easier catch for George, but George is like that for anybody. And if you're in or you're out, at the end of the day, he's got you. And at the moment, he's got Hitchins' number. But that means shit. At the end of the day, talk's talk, and we see it all the time. Fighters have the big talks. They sit there in disrespect. They carry on. The fight gets done. There's a winner, there's a loser, and then there's big hugs in the end. And then the old story at the press conference, you know what? Full respect. It means shit at the end of the day, mate. Our job at 140 is we're back in the mix. I negotiated the deal for George to fight Hitchins, and pretty much that's where we're at. And that's all our focus is to go there and do a number on him, mate. It's as simple as that. We've got the right team. We're going to add some extra firepower into the team, which I won't discuss. And the thing is, I think George coming off his last fight, and it's a quick turnaround, it favours us big time. It really does. It really favours George coming off a real quick turnaround. I mean, Hitchins fought in December last year. We're coming off a quick turnaround. So
yeah, this is going to be quite active. He hasn't been this active closest to for a long time.
Since he was bloody.
Well, he said ever.
Since
today.
He was like early days in his pros, when you kind of trying to rack up 5 fights, 6 fights a year. This is similar. You're going back to back and try to get 4 fights in for the year. Yeah. Whereas at championship level, one fight is the target. 2 fights is magnificent. So this is great for us, and I knew that was going to play out like that. And I said to George, you have your victory in Sydney. It's a quick turnaround, but I think it favours us, and it favours us really well. And that's exactly where we're at.